Assimilate para progresar. Son los gotta assimilate. Ay, mira lo que veo allá en esa puerta hincha. Las noticias plantan con bombas en plena vista. Assimilate para progresar. Son los gotta asimilar. Quieren gura americanos, latino, pero waspimano. So that song, I played it, I play every time I play any of my songs, kind of different every time, but that's an older song that I wrote many years ago, like in 2005 or something, or 6, and it's a plena, rhythmically a plena, which is a Puerto Rican rhythm from Puerto Rico, and plena is probably been around since the late 1800s or the mid 1800s, so it's not that old, but it's they call it the song newspaper. So people throughout the history of the plena in Puerto Rico have used it to kind of like say what's going on. That's why they call it a newspaper. So I always identified with this, even though I moved from Puerto Rico when I was 7. Plena is still very strong here in New York and in Boston, but I moved to a rural place originally from San Juan, and the first plena I heard actually was not live. Well, maybe I heard it, I don't remember it as a kid, but was on a recording made in Harlem, but in like the 1920s. And I was like, what? Plena in Harlem in the 1920s? What? And when I heard it, it was from these old recordings, and the people who sang, first of all, the recordings were really rough and raw, and the guys singing it, the people singing it, sounded like punk rock, which is what my oldest brother was listening to. And instead of being like now, a lot of music is super stylized, but in those days, they were just letting it out. Like it was like the blues, you know? Cortaron Elena, se la llevaron para el hospital. Eso daba pena, daba ganas de llorar.
To eat anyone, but I'm getting really hungry. Snakes are not delicious. No, they're disgusting. I don't like them. They're disgusting. No. No. I will not. I want to eat the cat. Please. Just a little bite. Maybe the tail. Yeah, this just kind of happened when I was doing this video stuff for another show that I was working on. And one day, Abraham and his friend were playing music, and I was just kind of playing around with the video in the background. And well, not his friend, his cousin actually, Gabo, was like, "That's cool. I like that." And from that point on, I started doing these videos for the shows.
And to me, it just sounded like the punk rock I was listening to, you know, like just raw. And also that it's a song newspaper, right? So I wanted to sing about what was going on you know, us immigrants that came up here. and it's always been a tool for me. So much, a lot of my music I call they're rhythmically they're plenas, you know, and I use them in my own way to tell, you know, what's going on, you know, in this crazy world that we came to. The song is Assimilate, which is English. The song is in Spanglish. So assimilate, para progresar, to progress, is a question mark. It's the which sounds cool, but that means USA in Spanish. It's the jugara, right? Spanglish, jugara asimilar in Spanish. And it's like, and looking back on that song, you know, there is like, it's not that simple. Like you're the one that has this, and who is the right? And to me at that time, it wasn't me, even though I was born here in Puerto Rico, right? I didn't see it as me represented. So it was a way of like, you know, a way of me being just saying, you know, like why do we have to assimilate to be here? And my father, when we came here, my father had a really hard time assimilating, and he had all these dreams and hopes, and I don't think it worked out so well for him, you know. And so I saw what my father was kind of trying to assimilate, which means to assimilate with whiteness, not necessarily white people, but whiteness. There's one of those terms, right? Those clarifications, right? That we got in the last few years. That's been around a long time too, you know. But, and it ate him up, right? It like, he figured out, like, doesn't matter. My dad's dark-skinned Indian from Peru was Amazon native person, and he, you know, he came up from the street, and he was very long, complicated life, but he basically went from picking through trash and begging door to door in Lima as a kid to becoming a lawyer. It was like he made it, self-made man, right? And that's how he went to Puerto Rico for an International Bar Association and met my mom. And they got married and had kids, 5 kids, and 4 were born in Peru, and I was born in Puerto Rico, the last one, and we moved back. But my father, moving into the US, couldn't practice law, he didn't speak the language, but he just thought that like these white cultured people would accept him because he was so educated. He married a light-skinned woman, my mother's light-skinned Puerto Rican. He played the whole game, right? And he was also very proud of his indigenous. He was like always like it made no sense, right? It was like always in opposition, right? He would play the game, but then he would not, behind closed doors. Anyway, that's a whole thing, but I saw that and was like, no. I see America, this other America, that is badass and beautiful and is not counted, you know?
I was born in the Soviet Union, during the Soviet Union time in Ukraine. And my first experience with art was a jewelry class, an after-school jewelry beading class. And otherwise, we didn't really have much art in school. And art was not something you were ever allowed to even think of as your profession in the Soviet Union. It was very, very few people who did it, and they were chosen by the Communist Party. So, so when I came here, I was 10 years old. My aunt was already here. My aunt and her family were allowed to come 10 years before us. So my parents said, Olio really loves to make jewelry. We need to get her some beads. And my aunt went out and she got the plastic jewelry making kits that they have for kids. And even then I was like a disgruntled artist. I was like, I can't work with this stuff. This is terrible. Because I had these beautiful tiny little beads that only like when I was in my 20s I found out were called seed beads. And they were nice and I guess more expensive. So my aunt gave me these like plastic toy beads. And I was like, okay, I guess I'll do something with them. And so as my first thing that I did in America was I would make necklaces. And my aunt was a librarian at Yale University. We moved to Connecticut. And she would sell my necklaces for $5, and that's how I made the big bucks.
My parents, like most parents, are highly complex people with many sides, and I have many feelings towards them that are sometimes in opposition to, but exist. That's why I love art, because those things can exist together and speak with each other. A lot of my music is that rhythm between those two things. As far as being immigrants, like the struggle, but I also admire them. Like, you know, what the amount, like as I get older, I realize how much more they struggle than I knew, and they struggle a lot, right, to come here. Even with my father got out of poverty through some flukes of things that happened, and he became educated, right? A street kid got an education and then ran with it. And he became a lawyer, which is just unheard of, a kid from the slums to doing that. So that is like props, big time, you know? But my father, because of colonialism, racism, like in Peru, you know, classism, being dark-skinned, the whole 9 yards, the trauma and being a street kid in Peru, like, you know, in the 1940s, you know, 30s, 40s is, I mean, so I grew up with that story, right? He was picking through trash, going from house to house, begging, him and his brother begging to be fed, right? That kind of poverty. The kind of poverty I grew up in was growing up in a chicken coop in Massachusetts that was converted into a house, where the house had newspaper for insulation, and we didn't have heat for the first 2 years. And coming from Puerto Rico, I had never experienced anything under like 78 degrees, you know, or whatever, 72, maybe 68 when we went out on a boat at night once, you know. And so that was like, but we have food, right? My parents both worked 3 jobs. My father couldn't practice law. And that was the thing, is that he was this highly educated guy expecting to come to this this land of promise. And he literally was taking my sisters, who were teenagers at the time, I'm the youngest of 5, taking them to job interviews to be a professor to translate for him. And the people were like, "Are you kidding me?" We're like, "You brought your daughter to the interview. You don't even speak the language." And in 1979, in the early 80s, you'd think that there was no English as a second language. There was nothing. It was basically like, to me, growing up in the South, the way that people describe the South and the North is all good. And no, man, we were running for our lives from the moment I got there. But here's the thing, is that my family dynamic, since I was the youngest, my oldest 3 siblings, especially the oldest 2, were raised in Peru with like great education. And they, in Peru, a lot of people that have money have servants and this whole thing. And so it was coming from that, and then thinking we were going to bring that to Puerto Rico. My father, because this U.S. couldn't, he had to sell used cars, work in a salsa club as a night manager. And in the 70s, salsa, I can't even imagine what he got into in that time, right? So, and then when we came here, now there's not only, you can't practice law, you don't even speak the language here, right? My mom spoke more English. My mom's the one that got the job. My mom all of a sudden was like, oh shit, I'm in charge. And then my father just kind of fell apart and just started disappearing, But I maintained a relationship with him until he died. He was, about 7 years ago. So it's complex. So it was like this, like, we are high class people in this family, but I'm like, okay, but why am I going to a school where I'm getting shot at, right? Like why do we have heat, But to me, it was like, no, we're not poor, we're high class, we're educated. It's like, and so that was something that was really like this, like, strange space to be in, and so what my father would teach me is great pride in being indigenous, great pride in being Peruvian, but and my mom just being a badass, literally having her husband taken off and saying, "Here are 5 kids, good luck." My mom literally taking care of everything. Like prairie kind of shit, and just seeing her as a woman, never complained once, which I think is a fault of hers, but I appreciate it, I wish she had complained, and so I grew up in all that, right? And I saw them kicking ass as immigrants, breaking down doors, especially my mom, and not closing that door behind her, helping a lot of people of us to take over this country. Ready? You ready for this? You ready for this? va a ser una película de horror. Si hombre lobo y es el lobo. Georgie Porgy murder here, Georgie Porgy murder there, Georgie Porgy murder here, Georgie Porgy murder there, Georgie Porgy murder here, Georgie Porgy murder there, Georgie Porgy did not care, Georgie Porgy did not care. Assimilate para progresar son los para asimilar. Assimilate para progresar son los jugar así.